Okay, so we need to finish talking about social styles and vowels and how these interact. Just as a reminder, what we started talking about was how social styles will tell you how to approach, and if you can figure out what the social style of your prospect is, how to, and we'll do an exercise in this in your groups on prospecting, so be thinking about this, how you're going to figure out what the social style of your prospect is. It will tell you how to approach them, how to talk to them, but it won't necessarily tell you what will motivate them, which is the vowels. The psychographics will tell you, if you can figure that out, and we can take environmental cues, it will tell you how they're going to think about things, what they're going to value, right? So we stopped by talking about thinkers. We talked about innovators to begin with, innovators, and we were doing this exercise where I asked you what you thought innovators would choose in terms of restaurants, and we came up with some that you thought would be attractive to innovators. Somebody said Ted's. I guess I would agree with that. I started thinking about that more, your example, because it's, different Mexican. So I guess that would be, attractive to innovators. But they're going to try different things, right? Thinkers focus on the normative. They like the ought or the should. They tend to be highly educated. Most of them tend to be traditionalists in terms of their generation. They have analysis paralysis. They have a historical perspective. And I told you that in order to have a more historical perspective, one of the reasons that I say these tend to be traditionalists or now baby boomers is because in order to have a historical perspective, you have to have experienced some history. We're going through an election season this year for the president of the United States, and I am now approaching 50 years old, and I can remember voting for quite a few presidents now. I was always interested in politics, so even at an early age, I paid attention to who was president, and I now can have some frame of reference that many of you don't have. You may have read about it, but you haven't experienced a whole lot of presidents. For most of you, probably the president that you remember the most is Barack Obama. And, now you're experiencing Donald Trump. But I can remember as a kid, I remember when Ronald Reagan was elected. It was a big deal. My family has always been interested in politics. My mother's been a politician. I've been a politician. We were at that time a house divided. My father was a Republican and my mother was a Democrat. And my father, who was an FBI agent, thought Reagan was just God, and my mother thought he was Satan. So the conversations at the dinner table were always interesting and heated. But I remember that. And so I have this historical perspective that I didn't have when I was in my early 20s, for example. And I had really only known at that point, Ronald Reagan and George Walker Bush. Bill Clinton was elected in my early 20s. And so, I didn't have a lot of perspective that I now have. They use technology in functional ways. And so we talked about this. What is it that they like about things like why is it they like the iPhone? Well, because they can FaceTime. And I told you my mother realized that she was babysitting vicariously through the iPhone her grandchildren one night when my brother called and said, the kids want to FaceTime with you. And they're running around the house. Where are your parents? Oh, they're having a dinner party. And she realized but they like that. I mean, my mother felt put upon. Both my parents, I don't think, are wonderful. They were fantastic parents. They absolutely loved, and we had everything that we ever wanted. But neither of them would be called, a nanny granny or something like that. My brother suggested to my mother that she sell her business, and when he started having children, that she go move up to New York at that time, and he would pay her. And she's like, "Are you going to pay me $300,000 a year because that's what I make?" And he was like, Right, so I mean, and she likes her grandchildren in I think very small doses. My father, even less so. I mean, you can tolerate them for about 5 minutes, and then you can see him become visibly uncomfortable around them. So, but most people like their grandkids, and they use this technology in functional ways. They tend to buy proven products, and so I told you that there was a book called Millionaire Next Door. They interviewed all these millionaires. The people who wrote the book Millionaire Next Door, they threw a party to try and get these people to come, and they had things like, at that time, I think the book was written in the late 80s or early 90s, they put out, at that time, one of the big things that was very, very popular and very chic, and it was on Dynasty and Dallas and all those shows, was eating caviar. This was a very exotic, it's not so exotic anymore, as sushi has become very, very popular, but caviar was enormously expensive at that time. It was, I don't know, like an ounce of caviar was $100 an ounce or something like that, which that was a lot of money. And so they put out caviar, and none of these people touched the food that they put out. And they found out that the average millionaire drove a Ford Taurus, because it was one of the most reliable and trustworthy cars at the time. That they buy proven products. So thinkers tend to be conservative in their purchasing. So what restaurants do you think thinkers are going to be attracted to, in keeping with our, give us an idea of what they think the thinker is going to like in terms of restaurants?
Longhorn Steakhouse.
Longhorn Steakhouse. Why is that?
It's been proven to be good.
Proven. It's good. It's a name brand.
Chick-fil-A.
You think they're going to like it?
Oh, they might.
No.
Geez. When I travel with my students, there are two things that I tell them. If you, and I say this jokingly, I don't mean this, right? So don't think I'm a violent person, but I tell them, if you mention Starbucks or Chick-fil-A to me, I will punch you in the throat. We're not going to go to Starbucks or Chick-fil-A. Starbucks is the tool of the devil. The devil has many tools. Starbucks is one of them. Chick-fil-A is another. So
Chick-fil-A.
yeah, Chick-fil-A is the tool of the devil. It's nothing but saturated fat. It's not even good chicken, really. I mean, it's if you deep fat fry anything, it's okay. But it's chicken on white bread. What's gonna, like, if you want good fried chicken, go to Aishin's.
Oh yeah.
Right? I mean, like, it's not Aishin's chicken. This is like people that, it's crappy chicken. I mean, it's not even Popeye's chicken, in my opinion. Yeah.
Probably like any proven food chain. Maybe
Okay.
like House Smith restaurants are very proven for good service, so they're probably going to be
Okay. All right.
Chipotle.
Chipotle. Okay.
Mickey
All right.
Mouse.
I think
Probably.
Longhorn Steakhouse is a good one. I think proven chains. I think they're going to like things like they have money. Remember, they have high access to resources. I'm not sure they're going to like Chick-fil-A. My grandmother was definitely, she had a master's degree. She was definitely a thinker. She liked things like at that time. There was a nationwide chain called Harrigan's, which it was a steakhouse basically, but it was upscale casual dining. I think they're going to like that. So I think Outback. In Charleston's, yeah. Charleston's is, it's a local chain. House Smith is a local chain. Very good quality, proven, and it's good. So I think those are ones that they're going to like, proven products. Believers like thinkers, believe in the normative. However, they have low access to resources. Right? They don't have high access to resources. They believe that right and wrong lead to a good life. When I was growing up in Oklahoma, in Guthrie, Oklahoma, this was probably the dominant Vals type. On Sunday morning until about 1:00, you could have shot a cannon off in downtown Guthrie and not hit a person, a soul. Because Sunday was church day. when I was growing up, this is gonna seem strange to you, but I went to high school in Guthrie, Oklahoma. Teachers were forbidden in Guthrie High School, they were forbidden from assigning homework on Wednesday night.
Wow.
Why is that?
We go to church on
It's
Wednesday.
church night. Yeah, the first Southern Baptist Church of Guthrie, that was a big church night. Wednesday nights were church night. You could not assign homework on a Wednesday night. That was verboten. We moved to Guthrie, Oklahoma in 1986. That was the height of the oil bust. So most people it was pretty, nobody moved, by the way, at that point in time to Oklahoma. Things were pretty bleak in Oklahoma. And so there were a lot of believers. They tended to believe that right and wrong lead to a good life. They're highly spiritual, friendly. They value consistency. So low access to resources, keeping with our theme. What do you think is going to be a restaurant that appeals to believers?
Brahms.
Brahms.
Oh, yeah.
It's a local chain. It's Oklahoma. I mean, Brahms they have good quality ice cream. Although I've had an experience at Brahms that has led me to never want to, two experiences
What?
at Brahms that have led me to never want to go back to Brahms. One is there's this attorney that I know who married this woman, and at the time her name was he calls her Miss Carolyn. And he went through this litany of people that he had dated before he finally found the prize, won, and he married Miss Carolyn. And he's like, and so I'm saying, well, Miss Carolyn, one of the questions that people ask, and I've stopped asking this question of people, what do you do for a living? People ask this question, and I'll tell you, people don't ask that question because they care about you. They ask that question because it's an instant way of A, creating conversation, and B, pegging where you are on the social strata, right? And I said, where do you work, Miss Carolyn? She said, Brahms. And I'm thinking, like works at corporate headquarters, she's a vice president or something, she's dressed well. And I'm like, oh, really? What do you do? I work at the Brahms on 23rd and Penn. And she's like, I started out on the grill, but I don't do that anymore because it was hot. Well, yes, Miss Carolyn, we tried frying hamburgers on a cold grill and it just didn't work out quite the same, so now she dips ice cream at the Brahms. Right? So that was I'm like, this is not the sharpest knife in the drawer. Then the second experience that I had that led me to not like Brahms, I was in the Brahms in Guthrie. My father comes from New Mexico to visit a lot. And they don't have Brahms in New Mexico because Brahms is a fully integrated supply chain. They use their own dairy products so they will only go as far as they can drive to keep it fresh, and so there's no Brahms. He thinks Brahms ice cream is just absolutely fantastic, and so I'm forced to go to Brahms. We're at the Brahms in Guthrie, and like this kid is like scooping my ice cream onto an ice cream cone, and it like falls, and he goes, and then he hands me the ice cream cone. And I was like, no. No,
Oh, poor kid.
no.
Poor kid.
Yeah.
What?
That was disgusting.
Yeah, no.
My sister, she's 14, she works there.
Right.
So,
What?
I have a 14-year-old sister that works there. So.
Okay, well,
I mean, I know she's old enough to know, but like,
yeah. But I think you're right. I think Brahms, it's consistent. It's, I guess, good value for the money. They have a good product in terms of, they do have good ice cream. So I think that's right. What else do you think would be attractive to believers?
I was thinking like a family-owned local diner.
Okay. Yeah, I think local diners would be, they know who it is. They go there a lot. They probably go after church on Sundays, and that's probably attractive. In Guthrie, we have a barbecue place called The Stables. And after church on Sundays, to this day, the church attendance, by the way, is dropping among most people. but in small towns, it's still pretty consistent. But after church on Sundays in Guthrie, you go to the stables and it is like packed wall to wall with people that have just gotten out of church, right? So, yeah, I think that's a local sort of family, establishment. I think that's right. They would like that. Achievers have a me first, my family first attitude. A lot of these people are first generation college graduates, and they've achieved success on their own, or what they perceive as being on their own. They tend to be goal-oriented, moderate, anchors of the status quo, and they value technology that provides productivity. So they like things that lead to a productive life, that make life easier. Where do you think achievers are going to want to eat? Huh? Dave & Buster's, why is that? A lot of electronics, okay. All right.
Main event.
It's also a main event. It's also an established brand. What else? Main event, you said main event. That's kind of like Dave & Buster's, except they have bowling and they have a ropes course and they have laser tag that Dave & Buster's just primarily has
Like
games, right? But yeah, it's a family-oriented. Those are all family-oriented places. They tend to be family-oriented, and so those are places that you can take your kids. You can get decent food. I'm not sure it's exceptional food, but it's decent food, and it's moderate. People go there, and it's a sort of family, like I said, family atmosphere. Where else do you think achievers would go?
Top
Well, I
line.
think, but I feel like Burger King or Carl's Jr. for some reason.
Burger King or Carl's Jr. Why is
I
that?
feel like that's
They
believable.
get the little crown from Burger King. Little kids.
You think Chili's?
But they use like for the value of technology for it, like
They use the,
touchscreen.
which I absolutely hate.
Yeah.
I just hate those stupid things that they put at the table so that you don't actually have to talk to a human being, right? Anymore. It drives me crazy. But yeah, I think that's technology that provides productivity. Now I can get my drink refilled. You can sit up there and touch the screen and say you want more drinks or whatever. So it's very useful technology. It also provides a way of keeping the kids entertained while you're there.
What restaurant did you say?
Chili's.
Chili's.
What about like restaurants? Like you can get like online coupons for it, and just like drive to go
Okay,
there more.
maybe.
What about like restaurants with food challenges? They're goal oriented.
Okay. Like what kinds of restaurants and food?
I guess at Buffalo they have like their the hottest wings they have. Laser
Oh.
challenge or
There used to be a restaurant. It's now Bricktown Brewery across the street, but it used to be Old Chicago.
Yeah.
And it was the World Beer Tour. And if you drank so many beers, you got your name on the plaque. And you also got a mug they would keep there for you so that you could drink beer out of it. That might be attractive. I don't think my brother is an achiever, but he does have little kids. And so one of the things that he likes, he doesn't really like the food, but he does like Buffalo Wild Wings because they give you free iPads. Like you can get your kids an iPad and they can play for free at Buffalo Wild Wings.
Really?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Go in and they'll ask them for an iPad for a kid and they'll get a free iPad while they're there. Like
Yeah.
not to take home. But and then they have little games. You can get an iPad. I think they'll give it to you, and you can watch the television screens, and they have trivia on them that you can answer the trivia on the iPad.
I've never seen that at Buffalo.
It's right at the front. Ask them for an iPad the next time you get on there.
Okay.
They'll probably usually they come to kids, but I know that that's one of the things. My niece and nephew love it because I think that's just great. Although now they have their own iPads, and so they take them everywhere. say things like, we're not gonna play with the iPad. We'll put the iPad down. Achievers also probably like to be seen at places that they view as being indicators of status. And so I think, I think you'll find a lot of achievers at places on Western Avenue, for example. How many of you have been to Republic? You'll find a lot of achievers there. When Chesapeake was going gangbusters, everyone who worked for Chesapeake was an achiever for the most part. They're all first generation college. They're, and they all would hang out when it was really going like I said, gangbusters. They would all hang out at Republic, and they have 1,000 beers on tap and stuff like that. So I think that's another place that they would be attracted to. Strivers. So strivers are like achievers, but they have low access to resources. They have high revolving employment. A lot of them will be involved in temporary work. A lot of you may be strivers at this point in your life, and you'll become an achiever or something else. They tend to be fun-loving, and they wear their wealth as a sign of, that I have something. They oftentimes will take piecemeal work, a lot of contract labor, things like that, in order to try and better themselves. Where do you think strivers would like to eat? Where they're often the centers of what we call street culture. So hipsters, for example, are strivers usually. The sushi bars? Okay. Where else do strivers? Paseo district.
Love
Yes.
Like ramen places.
Yeah, you'll find out. Yeah, the pho places, ramen.
There's on 23rd and Dewey, that area. I don't know what it's called. I think that area is
Where you
cool.
have 23rd Street body piercing.
Yeah.
And
They have a
the
Hertz
bunker.
Donuts there now.
Yeah.
Just somewhere where you can take a picture of the food and put it on Snapchat.
Yeah. Yes, they do that. A lot of them, we see them taking pictures of food. So like the bunker, the pump on
Yes.
Hudson and 23rd is another place.
Walker.
Pops, what's that?
No, Pub's not Walker.
Walker 23rd. Yeah. Achievers is at Hudson. Probably. H&H, where they have all of the food trucks, you'll find a lot of strivers there. Yeah, those are all places that would be attractive. In Edmond, there's a
Downtown
beer
area?
house that's
Patriarch.
the Patriarch, right? And they have food trucks that come out and go there. So I think that would be attractive to strivers. Experiencers. Experiencers are technology junkies. They want everything. They're the first in and out of a trend. So I have friends that I told you that were they were the first ones to get the iPhone, and I was like, that'll drop in 3 months. Is it really worth it? And they assured me that it was absolutely worth it to have that. Those friends are still iOS fanatics. They're Apple fanatics. They have Apple computers or Apple laptops and Apple phones. But one of my other friends that I think about, he works in technology at NOAA for the Weather Service, and he got an iPhone when it first came out, and he was also the first to ditch it. He, instantly when they came out with newer features on the Android, wanted an Android, and then when Google came out with their Google phone, he's one of these that I think he's had a new phone almost every single year because something comes out and he'll switch. Whereas I just think that's stupid. They all basically do the same thing, and you're now having to learn, different ways of doing it. I think that's just crazy. But he's one of these that he wants to experience everything. He's a technology geek. He's been in technology. That's his job. So he goes against the mainstream. The iPhone was released, and it was not big in the business world to begin with, because what was big in the business world when it was released? The BlackBerry. That's what everybody had. It was a stable platform. It was actually a better platform for business. My friend Robert insisted that he had to have the iPhone, but he was also the first to leave it. And something else came out. Like I said, he's got a new phone every single year, and he's constantly trying to tell me why I should switch phones, and I'm like, no, like that's just crazy talk. They tend to be very social. So where would you think experiencers would go for
Same place as Strivers,
maybe the collective? I think the parlor is another one that experiencers would like, because it's about different experiences and new stuff. Cultivar, I think, is another one. Some of these would be attractive to, also innovators. What else would experiencers like?
With Topgolf.
I think, when Topgolf first, they generally will try it and then they're gonna abandon it. My friend Robert's like that. He was like, wanted to go to Topgolf the day it opened and has never been back since. He was also the first one to go to do the iFly thing, and has not done that since. The river sports, the whitewater rapids on the river, and the zip line, and things like that. Experiencers love that.
Hookah bars.
Huh?
Hookah bars.
Hookah bars, probably. He loves, I think, we talked about Scratch, because they come up with all those stupid cocktails that nobody should drink. But just absolutely loves that. So very social, like to try everything, like to get out and experience everything. They were the first ones. I really thought this trend would catch on more than it has, but the virtual reality devices, I thought those would become much more popular than they are. How many of you actually have one? One person?
Kind of weird.
They're what?
They're kind of weird.
Yeah, they are. But I mean, I tried one. I have them, but
I saw one where it was in China. I remember it was on Twitter, and it was this mother using a virtual representation of her dead daughter to talk to her, and that just felt very problematic to me because she wasn't coping the right way with
right.
it.
That seems. I would think that would be.
Very counterproductive.
Yeah. But grief is one of those things that everybody experiences differently. But I would think that's not necessarily moving on. So that's a little odd. But you can go. I mean, I bought one of these when they first came out, and the first thing I did with it was go and view the Taj Mahal. And that was one of the things that they had. The world's largest single loomed carpet is in the Taj Mahal. The world's second largest single loomed carpet is in the Scottish Rite Temple in Guthrie, Oklahoma. So if you want to see it, you can tour the temple. It's open at 10 and 2 daily, Monday through Friday. There are, I think, 9 rooms decorated after ancient civilizations in that building. It is well worth the tour. It's like, I think, $5 to tour it. And most people don't even know it's there. So. Makers. Makers have a distrust of government. They tend to want to live outside the city limits, often in the country, even if they don't have horses or anything like that, because they don't want to be told what you can do with your property. I was talking in my ethics class today about corporations and Milton Friedman and the idea of free market capitalism and market failures. And Friedman would just say, well, that's just the cost of doing business. If you live in Edmond, the land of the shallow and pretentious, can you put your double wide, can you buy a lot in downtown Edmond and put your double wide on it? No. The answer is no. Edmond has a city ordinance against, manufactured housing being used. There are several places where it was sort of grandfathered in, but they will not allow any new manufactured housing areas to come into the city of Edmond. Why is that? Because when you have manufactured housing, it tends to decrease the property values around those areas. And Edmond doesn't want to do that. So, makers have a tendency, if I want my double wide, I want my double wide or whatever. I don't want you to tell me what I can do with my property, my land. So I'm gonna move out to the edge of town and, build my double wide and have my skunk works or my automotive. They like, automotive stuff. You'll find that they are engaged in restoration of cars and things like that, which is one of the things that's interesting to me about your generation, that this seems to have gone away. A lot of my friends, when I was growing up, we were the first generation to have a lot of access to computers, but we did not have access to this, right? We didn't have this in high school. Kids in high school now all have a cell phone. And a car was freedom. And it's amazing to me how many of my friends' kids don't get their driver's license at 16. They just don't care about it. But that was really antithetical to my generation. But they like to rebuild cars. That's something that your generation is not necessarily interested in. So they like automobiles, they like to fix things, they like to do it themselves. They are strong believers in gender roles. So they're very uncomfortable with all of these things. I've noticed that the university has now released a policy that allows people to, on our business cards, indicate which pronouns they prefer to be identified by, right? And so there's this whole movement now in society, as we've recognized, and I think the LGBTQ movement is the third great movement in terms of civil rights. The first great movement in civil rights was for African American rights, right? Mm-hmm. And that culminates in the 1950s, but starts with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the United States Constitution. The 13th Amendment frees all of the slaves. The 14th Amendment grants them due process and equal protection of the laws. It contains the second due process clause in the Constitution and the first and only equal protection clause. And then the 15th Amendment grants those free men the right to vote in elections. Because voting was a states' rights issue, and so they could deny people the right to vote. It now grants them suffrage. Women don't get the right to vote until the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution. So the women's rights movement is behind, in many respects, the civil rights movement for African Americans. The third great epoch in terms of civil rights that I think we've seen is the LGBTQ movement. And now there's a recognition that, for example, gender identity or gender roles may be more fluid than what we would think in terms of scientific biology. And so the university has adopted this policy that allows you, and so, for example, there are all kinds of new terms that are popping up, like cis man or cis woman. What is that? Does anybody know what this term means? Born a man or woman. You're born a man or woman, and you identify as male or female by the gender, as I understand it. I'm not an expert, and I'm not a sociologist, right? But as I understand it, cis man means I was born a male and I identify as male, right? So makers are very uncomfortable with this whole idea. They believe in strong gender roles and gender identity, right? And that there are differences in the genders, and that those are clearly defined and should be maintained. So where do you think makers want to go in terms of restaurants? What kinds of restaurants would appeal to makers?
Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A. I'm going to agree with you here.
Yeah.
Yes. Why would Chick-fil-A? Chick-fil-A is, they advertise themselves, and I think from an ethics perspective, I think it's very disingenuous because they close on Sunday because it's a Christian company, but their supply chain isn't closed on Sunday. I mean, they're giving their front end workers. I mean, in my opinion, this is very disingenuous, and the same could be said of Hobby Lobby because
Yeah.
they are giving their front end workers, but the warehouses for Hobby Lobby work 7 days a week, right? So I have some real ethical issues with that, but yes, I think Chick-fil-A is a Christian faith-based company, or at least that's what they said,
Yeah.
right? That's what they say, and so yeah, I think makers absolutely would love that. What else do makers like?
Small-time diners.
Small time diners, yep, that are family owned, family run. How about Golden Corral,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I mean, you can make your own meal and you can pitch till you win.
Cracker Barrel.
Cracker Barrel, absolutely. That's another one that I think would be very appealing to makers. Again, it's an old time kind of feel, a return. What is Cracker Barrel's whole sort of brand image?
Rustic.
It's
kinda
rustic and nostalgia. You go in and they've got old time stuff on the walls, and they've got a country, what they call a country store, which has all kinds of stuff that are a little artsy and craftsy. Very traditional games, like you're not, Cracker Barrel is not selling iPhones with, the latest, Fortnite uploaded or whatever. They're selling things like checkers. They sell checkers boards, not chess, checkers. Like chess might be a little too sophisticated for that. What else? They all sorts of things. So I think Cracker Barrel is definitely a good one. Chick-fil-A is a good one. I think Golden Corral. Any others that you can think of? You said country diners. What else? Qdoba, okay. What kinds of products are makers going to be interested in?
Local, like locally farmed and like.
Okay, yep, there's a whole Made in Oklahoma at the State Fair section, so I think that's right.
Home Depot, Lowe's.
Home Depot, I think that's absolutely right. They're going to be interested in doing it themselves.
Like
Things
vintage
that.
stores.
Yeah, probably.
Guns.
That's right. Yes, they are absolutely interested in guns.
We should just call it
Again,
that.
these are the ones that are most likely to belong to the NRA, to have a concealed carry permit,
Sounds like my dad.
things like that. The least access to resources are survivors. These are generally the oldest consumers on a very limited income, enormously cautious, very thrifty. Survivors are the most likely to still have a landline. How many of you have a landline? Anybody still have a landline? I do too. But it's because I have a business. So they're the most likely to have a landline. They're very loyal to products and brands. They spend lots of time alone. Thrifty. So what kinds of restaurants do you think are going to appeal to survivors?
McDonald's.
Absolutely, yes. The dollar meal at McDonald's is going to appeal to them. It's good. I mean, you go into a McDonald's in the morning, in any of them. This is particularly true in Guthrie, but you go in there and there's a whole little clutch of old timers that go in because coffee is still, and they bitch about the fact that coffee is actually $1 because they remember when a cup of coffee was 25 cents. Right? But you get free refills on the coffee, and you can get a sausage McMuffin or hash browns for $1. So for $2, you can get coffee and a sausage McMuffin, or coffee and a hash brown, right? No nutritional value there, right? Or very limited nutritional value, but yeah, I think that's absolutely going to appeal to them. They spend a lot of time thinking about saving money and being thrifty. They're the most likely to make their own clothes, for example. Still, one of the things that's interesting to me is that there used to be all kinds of fabric stores, like Hancock's Fabrics, that have all gone broke anymore. I mean, they're gone. There's one big fabric store left, I think, in all of Northwest Oklahoma City. It's J-Vans. It's out way out on Northwest Expressway. What?
Helen Enoch.
What is it?
Helen Enoch. They sell more like luxury fabrics though.
Okay. Yeah.
It's like
There used to be a Hancock's right here in Bryant Square. It's gone. I think they've totally gone out of business. And they weren't the only ones when I was a kid growing up. That, you know, Walmart, the fabric section used to be a huge section in Walmart. It's now basically 2 aisles. So it's hard to find those kinds of things, but they're the most that are going to be interested in doing that, and sewing and arts and crafts and things like that they can make themselves. Any questions about Vals or social styles? All right. Any? None? So what can we do to improve our ability to communicate? How can we become more successful ourselves in our communication? Well, one of the things that we can do is we can increase our attitude and motivation to allow for better communication. And to that end, I want to play Amy Cuddy's video on
So I want to start by offering you a free no-tech life hack. And all it requires of you is this, that you change your posture for 2 minutes. But before I give it away, I want to ask you to right now do a little audit of your body and what you're doing with your body. So how many of you are sort of making yourselves smaller? Maybe you're hunching, crossing your legs, maybe wrapping your ankles. Sometimes we hold on to our arms like this. Sometimes we spread out. I see you. So I want you to pay attention to what you're doing right now. We're going to come back to that in a few minutes. And I'm hoping that if you sort of learn to tweak this a little bit, it could significantly change the way your life unfolds. So we're really fascinated with body language, and we're particularly interested in other people's body language. You know, we're interested in, like, you know, an awkward interaction or a smile or a contemptuous glance or maybe a very awkward wink, or maybe even something like a handshake.
Here they are arriving at number 10, and look at this lucky policeman gets to shake hands with the President of the United States. Oh, and here comes the Prime Minister of the...
A handshake or the lack of a handshake can have us talking for weeks and weeks and weeks, even the BBC and the New York Times. So obviously, when we think about nonverbal behavior or body language, but we call it nonverbals as social scientists, it's language. So we think about communication. When we think about communication, we think about interactions. So what is your body language communicating to me? What's mine communicating to you? And there's a lot of reason to believe that this is a valid way to look at this. The social scientists have spent a lot of time looking at the effects of of our body language or other people's body language on judgments. And we make sweeping judgments and inferences from body language. And those judgments can predict really meaningful life outcomes, like who we hire or promote, who we ask out on a date. For example, Nalini Ambady, a researcher at Tufts University, shows that when people watch 30-second soundless clips of real physician-patient interactions, their judgments of the physician's niceness predict whether or not that physician will be sued. So it doesn't have to do so much with whether or not that physician was incompetent, but do we like that person and how they interacted? Even more dramatic, Alex Todorov at Princeton has shown us that judgments of political candidates' faces in just 1 second predict 70% of US Senate and gubernatorial race outcomes. And even, let's go digital, emoticons used well in online negotiations can lead you to claim more value from that negotiation. If you use them poorly, bad idea, right? So when we think of nonverbals, we think of how we judge others, how they judge us, and what the outcomes are. We tend to forget, though, the other audience that's influenced by our nonverbals, and that's ourselves. We are also influenced by our nonverbals, our thoughts and our feelings and our physiology. So what nonverbals am I talking about? I'm a social psychologist. I study prejudice, and I teach at a competitive business school. So it was inevitable that I would become interested in power dynamics. I became especially interested in nonverbal expressions of power and dominance. And what are nonverbal expressions of power and dominance? Well, this is what they are. So in the animal kingdom, they are about expanding. So you make yourself big, you stretch out, you take up space, you're basically opening up. It's about opening up. And this is true across the animal kingdom. It's not just limited to primates, and humans do the same thing. So they do this both when they have power sort of chronically, and also when they're feeling powerful in the moment. And this one is especially interesting because it really shows us how universal and old these expressions of power are. This expression, which is known as pride, Jessica Tracy has studied, she shows that people who are born with sight and people who are congenitally blind do this when they win at a physical competition. So when they cross the finish line and they've won, it doesn't matter if they've never seen anyone do it, they do this. So the arms up in the V, the chin is slightly lifted. What do we do when we feel powerless? We do exactly the opposite. We close up, we wrap ourselves up, we make ourselves small. We don't want to bump into the person next to us. So again, both animals and humans do the same thing. And this is what happens when you put together high and low power. So what we tend to do when it comes to power is that we complement the other's nonverbals. So if someone's being really powerful with us, we tend to make ourselves smaller. We don't mirror them, we do the opposite of them. So I'm watching this behavior in the classroom, and what do I notice? I notice that MBA students really exhibit the full range of power nonverbal. So you have people who are like caricatures of alphas, like really coming into the room. They get right into the middle of the room before class even starts, like they really want to occupy space. When they sit down, they're sort of spread out. They raise their hands like this. You have other people who are virtually collapsing when they come in. As soon as they come in, you see it. You see it on their faces and their bodies, and they sit in their chair and they make themselves tiny, and they go like this when they raise their hand. I noticed a couple of things about this. One, you're not going to be surprised. It seems to be related to gender. So women are much more likely to do this kind of thing than men. Women feel chronically less powerful than men, so this is not surprising. But the other thing I noticed is that it also seemed to be related to the extent to which the students were participating and how well they were participating. And this is really important in the MBA classroom because participation counts for half the grade. So business schools have been struggling with this gender grade gap. You get these equally qualified women and men coming in, and then you get these differences in grades, and it seems to be partly attributable to participation. So I started to wonder, okay, so you have these people coming in like this and they're participating. Is it possible that we could get people to fake it, and would it lead them to participate more? So my main collaborator, Dana Carney, who's at Berkeley, and I really wanted to know, can you fake it till you make it? Like, can you do this just for a little while and actually experience a behavioral outcome that makes you seem more powerful? So we know that our nonverbals govern how other people think and feel about us. There's a lot of evidence, but our question really was, do our nonverbals govern how we think and feel about ourselves? There's some evidence that they do. So, for example, when we smile when we feel happy, but also when we're forced to smile by holding a pen in our teeth like this, it makes us feel happy. So it goes both ways. When it comes to power, it also goes both ways. So when you feel powerful, you're more likely to do this, but it's also possible that when you pretend to be powerful, you are more likely to actually feel powerful. So the second question really was, so we know that our minds change our bodies. Is it also true that our bodies change our minds? And when I say minds, in the case of the powerful, what am I talking about? So I'm talking about thoughts and feelings and the sort of physiological things that make up our thoughts and feelings. And in my case, that's hormones. I look at hormones. So what do the minds of the powerful versus the powerless look like? So powerful people tend to be, not surprisingly, more assertive and more confident, more optimistic. They actually feel that they're going to win even at games of chance. They also tend to be able to think more abstractly. So there are a lot of differences. They take more risks. There are a lot of differences between powerful and powerless people. Physiologically, there also are differences on two key hormones, testosterone, which is the dominance hormone, and cortisol, which is the stress hormone. So what we find is that high power alpha males in primate hierarchies have high testosterone and low cortisol. And powerful and effective leaders also have high testosterone and low cortisol. So what does that mean? When you think about power, people tended to think only about testosterone because that was about dominance. But really, power is also about how you react to stress. So do you want the high power leader that's dominant, high on testosterone, but really stress reactive? Probably not, right? You want the person who's powerful and assertive and dominant, but not very stress reactive, the person who's laid back. So we know that in primate hierarchies, if an alpha needs to take over, if an individual needs to take over an alpha role sort of suddenly, within a few days, that individual's testosterone has gone up significantly and his cortisol has dropped significantly. So we have this evidence, both that the body can shape the mind, at least at the facial level, and also that role changes can shape the mind. So what happens, okay, you take a role change, what happens if you do that at a really minimal level, like this tiny manipulation, this tiny intervention? For 2 minutes, you say, I want you to stand like this, and it's going to make you feel more powerful. So this is what we did. We decided to bring people into the lab and run a little experiment. And these people adopted for 2 minutes either high power poses or low power poses. And I'm just going to show you 5 of the poses, although they took on only 2. So here's one, couple more. This one has been dubbed the Wonder Woman by the media. Here are a couple more. So you can be standing or you can be sitting. And here are the low power poses. So you're folding up, you're making yourself small. This one is very low power. When you're touching your neck, you're really kind of protecting yourself. So this is what happens. They come in, they spit into a vial. We, for 2 minutes, say, you need to do this or this. They don't look at pictures of the poses. We don't want to prime them with the concept of power. We want them to be feeling power, right? So 2 minutes they do this. We then ask them, how powerful do you feel on a series of items? And then we give them an opportunity to gamble. And then we take another saliva sample. That's it. That's the whole experiment. So this is what we find. Risk tolerance, which is the gambling. What we find is that when you're in the high power pose condition, 86% of you will gamble. When you're in the low power pose condition, only 60%. And that's a pretty whopping significant difference. Here's what we find on testosterone. From their baseline when they come in, high power people experience about a 20% increase, and low power people experience about a 10% decrease. So again, 2 minutes and you get these changes. Here's what you get on cortisol. High power people experience about a 25% decrease, and the low power people experience about a 15% increase. So 2 minutes lead to these hormonal changes that configure your brain to basically be either assertive, confident, and comfortable, or really stress reactive, and feeling sort of shut down. And we've all had that feeling, right? So it seems that our nonverbals do govern how we think and feel about ourselves. So it's not just others, but it's also ourselves. Also, our bodies change our minds. But the next question, of course, is, can power posing for a few minutes really change your life in meaningful ways? So this is in the lab, this is a little task, it's just a couple of minutes. Where can you actually apply this, which we cared about, of course. And so we think it's really what matters and where you want to use this is evaluative situations, like social threat situations. Where are you being evaluated? Either by your friends, like for teenagers at the lunchroom table. It could be, for some people, it's speaking at a school board meeting. It might be giving a pitch or giving a talk like this or doing a job interview. We decided that the one that most people could relate to, because most people had been through, was the job interview. So we published these findings, and the media are all over it, and they say, okay, so this is what you do when you go in for the job interview, right? So we were, of course, horrified, and I said, oh my God, no, that's not what we meant at all, for numerous reasons. No, don't do that. Again, this is not about you talking to other people, it's you talking to yourself. What do you do before you go into a job interview? You do this. Right? You're sitting down, you're looking at your iPhone or your Android, not trying to leave anyone out. You're looking at your notes, you're hunching up, making yourself small, when really what you should be doing maybe is this, like in the bathroom, right? Do that, find 2 minutes. So that's what we want to test, okay? So we bring people into a lab, and they do either high or low power poses again. They go through a very stressful job interview. It's 5 minutes long. They are being recorded, they're being judged also, and the judges are trained to give no nonverbal feedback. So they look like this. Like, imagine this is the person interviewing you. So for 5 minutes, nothing. And this is worse than being heckled. People hate this. It's what Marianne LaFrance calls standing in social quicksand. So this really spikes your cortisol. So this is the job interview we put them through, because we really wanted to see what happened. We then have these coders look at these tapes, 4 of them. They're blind to the hypothesis, they're blind to the conditions. They have no idea who's been posing in what pose. And they end up looking at these sets of tapes, and they say, oh, we want to hire these people, all the high power posers. We don't want to hire these people. We also evaluate these people much more positively overall. But what's driving it? It's not about the content of the speech. It's about the presence that they're bringing to the speech. We also, because we rate them on all these variables related to sort of competence, like how well structured is the speech? How good is it? What are their qualifications? No effect on those things. This is what's affected, these kinds of things. People are bringing their true selves, basically. They're bringing themselves. They bring their ideas, but as themselves, with no, residue over them. So this is what's driving the effect, or mediating the effect. So when I tell people about this, that our bodies change our minds, and our minds can change our behavior, and our behavior can change our outcomes, they say to me, it feels fake, right? So I said fake it till you make it. Like, it's not me. Like, I don't want to get there and then still feel like a fraud. I don't want to feel like an imposter. I don't want to get there only to feel like I'm not supposed to be here. And that really resonated with me, because I want to tell you a little story about being an imposter and feeling like I'm not supposed to be here. When I was 19, I was in a really bad car accident. I was thrown out of a car, rolled several times. I was thrown from the car, and I woke up in a head injury rehab ward, and I had been withdrawn from college, and I learned that my IQ had dropped by 2 standard deviations, which was very traumatic. I knew my IQ because I had identified with being smart, and I had been called gifted as a child. So I'm taken out of college. I keep trying to go back. They say, you're not going to finish college. Like, just, there are other things for you to do, but that's not going to work out for you. So I really struggled with this. And I have to say, having your identity taken from you, your core identity, and for me, it was being smart, having that taken from you, there's nothing that leaves you feeling more powerless than that. So I felt entirely powerless. I worked and worked and worked, and I got lucky and worked and got lucky and worked. Eventually, I graduated from college. It took me 4 years longer than my peers. And I convinced someone, my angel advisor, Susan Fisk, to take me on. And so I ended up at Princeton, and I was like, I am not supposed to be here. I am an imposter. And the night before my first year talk, and the first year talk at Princeton is a 20-minute talk to 20 people. That's it. I was so afraid of being found out the next day that I called her and said, I'm quitting. She was like, you are not quitting because I took a gamble on you and you're staying. You're going to stay, and this is what you're going to do. You're going to fake it. You're going to do every talk that you ever get asked to do. You're just going to do it and do it and do it, even if you're terrified and just paralyzed and having an out-of-body experience until you have this moment where you say, oh my gosh, I'm doing it. Like, I have become this. I am actually doing this. So that's what I did. 5 years in grad school, a few years, I'm at Northwestern. I moved to Harvard. I'm at Harvard. I'm not really thinking about it anymore. But for a long time, I had been thinking, not supposed to be here, not supposed to be here. So the end of my first year at Harvard, a student who had not talked in class the entire semester, who I had said, look, you've got to participate or else you're going to fail, came into my office. I really didn't know her at all. And she came in totally defeated, and she said, I'm not supposed to be here. And that was the moment for me, because two things happened. One was that I realized, oh my gosh, I don't feel like that anymore. I don't feel that anymore, but she does, and I get that feeling. And the second one, she is supposed to be here. Like, she can fake it, she can become it. So it's like, yes, you are. You are supposed to be here, and tomorrow you're gonna fake it. You're gonna make yourself powerful, and you're gonna. You're gonna go into the classroom, and you are gonna give the best comment ever. And she gave the best comment ever, and people turned around, they're like, oh my God, I didn't even notice her sitting there. She comes back to me months later, and I realized that she had not just faked it till she made it, she had actually faked it till she became it. So she had changed. And so I want to say to you, don't fake it till you make it. Fake it till you become it. It's not do it enough until you actually become it and internalize. The last thing I want to leave you with is this. Tiny tweaks can lead to big changes. So this is 2 minutes. 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. Before you go into the next stressful, evaluative situation, for 2 minutes, try doing this in the elevator, in a bathroom stall, at your desk behind closed doors. That's what you want to do. Configure your brain to cope the best in that situation. Get your testosterone up, get your cortisol down. Don't leave that situation feeling like, oh, I didn't show them who I am. Leave that situation feeling like, oh, I really feel like I got to say who I am and show who I am. So I want to ask you first, both to try power posing, and also I want to ask you to share this science, because this is simple. I don't have ego involved in this. Give it away, share it with people, because the people who can use it the most are the ones with no resources and no technology and no status and no power. Give it to them, because they can do it in private. They need their bodies, privacy, and 2 minutes, and it can significantly change the outcomes of their life. Thank you.
So the reason I show you this is when we talk about social styles is because obviously a big portion of our social style and a big portion of our communication is nonverbals. And it's what we are saying to other people and how we can become successful in sales using nonverbals. And so I think it's an enormously important thing. And I can tell you that this is not just something that Amy Cuddy did. My mother actually was involved. She was a master's candidate to become a school administrator. And as part of that, they did an experiment in her master's program, when she was going to become a principal. They did an experiment as part of a research study to take at-risk youth and see if they could transform them into better students. And they did the exact same thing. They went in and they took this group. My mother at that time, before she moved to Los Alamos, before she married my father, she was teaching in a very poor district in New Mexico called Belen, New Mexico. It was the exact opposite of Los Alamos, where she ended up teaching when I was a kid, when I was little. Belen is very, very rural, very poor. It's one of the poor counties in one of the poor areas in northern New Mexico. And they took students and they asked them, they did these interviews with these students in their sophomore year of high school, asking them, what is it that makes a good student? And they asked them for an inventory of traits that make a good student. And then they said, okay, we want you to, for 2 weeks, do those traits and become a good student. At the end of 2 weeks, 75% of them maintained it and continued on and became good students and graduated with higher GPAs than they probably otherwise would have. So you can do this, and I think it's important. It's also important because our non-viewers, again, will influence our social styles and how we talk to people and how we communicate and how we sell. That's probably a good place to stop. Are there any questions? All right. Well, I will see you today is Thursday, right? I will see you on Tuesday. If you did not sign the roll sheet, it's right there. So be sure and sign that. What's that?
Yeah. Did you just look at it? Yeah. Yeah, and I was like, like, I'm not going. And I was like,
It's better to show.
no, yeah. Because I was like,